So again, hi, my name's Tia. Thanks so much for having me here today. We're going to be talking about RimWorld expansions, a marketing postmortem. So a bit about me. I'm the marketing director at Ludion Studios. I've been working on RimWorld since 2021. I primarily do marketing and PR, but I'm also behind some content, biz dev, and design. Those are my socials. And again, I'm living in Montreal, but I'm actually from Vancouver. So it's really nice to be back. Quick overview of today. So we're going to be talking about the marketing and PR around RimWorld's expansions and the lessons we learned from these campaigns and PR beats. So about RimWorld, why we made our expansions, we'll go through those marketing campaigns, and then a couple of fun events that happened. So let's start off with, OK, no audio, good. Let's start off with the intro to RimWorld. It's a sci-fi colony simulator, and you crash land on a dangerous planet, and you have to survive. You start out by collecting resources and building a base, and eventually you'll have to defend yourself from raiders, sentient robots, insects. And RimWorld is an immersive story generator. So there are systems upon systems to create interactions with your colonists, and they'll fall in love and get married, and then their spouse will die, and they'll go crazy because of it and go and dig up corpses. So every playthrough is different and unique, and the stories always change. Some quick facts. So RimWorld has 160,000 reviews on Steam, and we're at 97% positive. We have 4 expansions. We've got a bunch of free updates for the game, a console port, and we're turning 11 years old this year. Yay. So RimWorld fully released in 2018, and the team very quickly started working on expansions. And for context, this is what we call our DLCs. So the reason why is that RimWorld has the potential and design space for expansions, and not every game has this. RimWorld isn't a closed story with a defined ending that makes it difficult to add new content. It's about building a town of people and surviving for years. So obviously, there's a lot of room to add things like sci-fi Western themes, children, robots, xenohumans, DNA mods, and religion, and so much more. So we added all of those in expansions. Also, some obvious stuff, that expansions increase your game's lifespan and earn you money. Our players put hundreds of hours into RimWorld, so adding more content keeps them coming back, as well as keeps us relevant, and our modders have more tools to use. Earns us money so our team can grow and we can be encouraged to keep working on the game. But it's also a way to monetize player time. So if over a third of your players are spending hundreds of hours in the game, and you're only charging $35 per copy, your game is under monetized. So think about revenue per copy. This points to us making expansions. We also had a lot more security and confidence in working on expansions versus a new product. There's no guarantee your new game will do as well as your old game, and it really would have been silly to walk away from the opportunity that was RimWorld. There were lots of players, and they were all asking for new content. So overall, expansions were a better bet to work on versus a new game that could fail and take a really long time. And also, so RimWorld is an expansion game now, and we actually earn more revenue from our expansions than the base game. So over a third of our players own at least one expansion, and it's likely much higher than this. It's just pretty hard to track. An idea of our sales makeup is that in July this year, 40% of our units sold were RimWorld, and 60% of them were expansions. And then net revenue, about 45% of that came from RimWorld, and 55% of that from expansions. So again, we're making some money from them. So our first expansion is Royalty. Royalty is themed around this royal empire that comes to your planet, and they ask you for help and give you quests in exchange for psychic powers, noble titles, and some cool tech. This is very heavy quest and content expansion, but Royalty's release was a little unusual. It didn't have any announcement, and also no Steam store page to get wishlist. It just came out. And this was obviously a very big surprise to the community. And of course, the question is, why wasn't there an announcement? And really, it's pretty simple. Ludion's philosophy has always been development comes first. So that means that we don't discuss future releases or what's next. We don't promise it'll be ready on this date or that it'll have certain features because we've been wrong before and things constantly change. So it's just much safer to not promise anything at all. And the most extreme version of that is to just not announce anything until it's literally ready. Another thing is the strategy had worked up until this point, so there was no drive to change it. Also, the team was very small. They didn't have a CM or a community manager or a marketing director. So dedicating a team member or spending time to hire someone would have cut their development by 20%. So some of the marketing lessons from Royalty. The first thing is that we should have done an announcement. It would have been nice to have that store page where we're collecting wish lists and we're showing up in Steam's popular upcoming, and more RimWorld players would have learned that it existed. This was also a very big opportunity for RimWorld. There were a lot of players asking for new content, and there was also the novelty of the very first RimWorld expansion. And Royalty did well, but with marketing, it could have done better because marketing is an amplifier. So we would have amplified the success of Royalty. We also learned that simply having expansions will lead to you getting negative reviews for your base game. The fact you're making expansions upsets people. And they will say, for lots of reasons, but this is just a fact. It will happen. OK, so moving on to ideology. This is our second expansion, and this is where I come in. I joined in 2021 to specifically help with ideology. It is an expansion themed around belief systems, so essentially a religion for your colony. And you have immense freedom and creativity when you're designing this. You can be blind undergrounder mole people or pirate nudist cannibals. And part of our learnings from the last expansion is that we need a marketing campaign. We need some marketing in here. So I came in with a marketing plan. And since we have a lot of indie devs here, I wanted to talk about how I make mine. So here's a very bare bones version of a plan. I start from release date, and then I work backwards. So I write everything down and then organize it by month down to the day. So it's small there, but for example, if I know my expansion is going to come out in September, I know that at least 1 month ahead, I need my Steam store page published to the public. And I need to be sending out my emails and press keys to influencers. So that means at least 2 months before, I need my Steam store page done and sent to Steam for review. I need to be recording my trailer and editing it, and I need my press kit done. So that means at least 3 months before that, I'm getting an artist to do my key art. I'm researching my influencers and writing all those pitch emails. And you extend this to 9 months, a year, further than that, whatever your product needs. So next, I'll show you some of the marketing beats I used for ideology. I used the same format for all of the RimWorld expansions. So first, we're talking about teaser blog posts. And these are really important for RimWorld because they get massive interactions with our players and visibility. So this ideology announcement got 17,000 upvotes. And a normal announcement would be more like 2,000 to 3,000 upvotes. And RimWorld's communications have primarily been through text and these big text announcements. We used to do devlogs, but they're extremely high effort, and you lose a lot of detail. So text has been our primary form of communication. Next up is our influencer and press outreach. So by the time we did ideology, it was pretty easy because RimWorld's quite established by this time. There's lots of content creators, and they're consistently uploading stuff. So the most time-consuming part was collecting their information. And I've experimented with PR agencies, but in my case, I prefer to do my research on my own because I found that mass emailing campaigns didn't generate good leads. And so the time that I put into that, I would rather just spend researching influencers on my own. This, I always think, is the coolest part. Steam allowed us to have front page features for RimWorld for anyone that already owns the game to show the new expansions. And granted, you have to be pretty big to be able to get these. And it would have been nicer if we could show it to everyone on Steam, but we were limited to people who already owned RimWorld. And then a small thing, we do these in-game icons to indicate whether you own the DLCs or you don't. Spoilers for looking too closely at those expansions. We'll talk about them soon. But this is essentially our current solution for how we advertise our expansions in-game. We're really deeply against anything that's spammy or obtrusive or intrusive that prevents you from just playing the game. So it's mild, but this is what we've come up with. So the results of our marketing campaign. We announced with 2.5 weeks between announcement and release. You can see we did these teaser blog posts and the considerable bumps in wish lists that they generated. We then released with 133,000 wish lists. Of those, 42% converted on release day, which, nearly 50%. That feels pretty good. We didn't have royalties wish lists to compare, but again, we felt good about that. So, our marketing lessons from ideology. First thing is that we should have been giving our PR beats time to breathe. So our audience didn't have time to engage with those beats. We only gave ourselves 2.5 weeks between announcement and release. So by the time a player had gotten the chance to read a blog and digest it, the next one was out. And then by the time they look at that one, the game is out. So there really wasn't enough time for those beats to breathe and generate the wish lists and get the fan appreciation that should have been there. Next thing is we needed to be very careful about setting player expectations. So you do this through your marketing, but it's also through our previous expansions. They set the precedent for the next expansion. So Royalty, which was the expansion before, was a very content-heavy quest expansion. And players thought Ideology might be like that too. It was not. Ideology is more of a role-playing expansion. It doesn't give you a lot to do directly, but it adds a ton of flavor and storytelling to a normal playthrough. So we struggled to communicate this idea and explain it to our players. So when Ideology came out, there was a lot of confusion with them not knowing what to expect. So after Ideology, everything is going really good. We've got some great sales, 2 successful expansions, working on a 3rd, and also we're looking at working on our console port. And we're getting ready to announce it later this year in 2022. So next, this is the part where we get banned in Australia. So in late February 2022, news articles are going up that our secret, unannounced console port, was refused classification by the Australian Classification Board. And this was a result of our console partner having to apply for ratings there. So being refused classification basically means your game is banned in Australia. And since these ratings are published publicly, it also means our console port just leaked. So it's not unheard of for the Australia board to refuse classification for console games. It's happened for things like Disco Elysium and Fallout for the same reasons it happened to RimWorld. Supposed drug use where the player is incentivized to use them. Historically, those bans didn't affect the PC version of the game. But for RimWorld, it did. So a few days later, RimWorld's taken down from Steam and for Australians. And this was really scary for us. We posted an announcement apologizing to our community because we're worried. We don't know how they're going to react. But the response is generally very understanding and positive. But we don't know what this means for RimWorld going forward. Are we going to be banned in other places? But our console partners are awesome for this. They handled all of the legal stuff. We're just on standby to answer questions. So in late March, we get our appeal case. And the RimWorld community was really sweet here. They helped us find examples of games that had been rated by the Australian board, and they weren't banned, that had drug use connected to player incentives. So we were looking at things like Disco Elysium and Fallout, and also Binding of Isaac. We were also responsible for explaining how RimWorld depicts drugs as part of this hard-bitten world, and that they're negative. When your colonists use drugs, they're ineffective at their tasks, they have a lot of mood and mental problems, and they can die. So it's obvious when you're playing that drugs are harmful to your colony, and they'll kill your colonists, and it just isn't a sustainable strategy. So the result of all this work is that, yay, RimWorld's unbanned, and we're reclassified as R18+. And then we got to go back on Steam. Yay. So some marketing lessons from the Australia ban. Again, some context on the timeline here. So March to April, we were banned. We got unbanned in April. And then we got a lot of PR and buzz around this unbanning process. But we also noticed that our sales didn't go up in April. They weren't any higher with this news. And so the idea that any publicity is good publicity doesn't always apply here. Sometimes it's just noise. That being said, we did notice a very slight increase in our Australian Q2 and Q3 sales compared to previous years. So it's likely that those made up for the loss of sales in Q1 due to this ban, but again, they're pretty small. We also found that applying for console ratings can leak your console port. And it wasn't a terrible, nothing bad happened. We still announced the port and players were really excited. And then we also found that it's a myth that if your console version is banned, it won't affect your PC version. It's not true. Your PC version isn't safe. So moving on to our third expansion, biotech. This one was really cool. It's a very ambitious project with 3 main features: children, genetic modification, and building a robot army. And it was our biggest expansion yet. In fact, it could have been 2 separate products. So with biotech, we really embraced the idea that game design is marketing. The whole concept of marketing is that you're identifying a product that people want, and then you're strategically showing it to them with the goal of selling it. So we're focusing on designing a game that people actually want to play and thus buy. So for biotech, adding children to the game was everything good for RimWorld. It created this new class of rich relationships and stories and consequences for your characters. It gave new emotions and reasons to care, and added some very powerful story elements. Think of games like The Last of Us and the role that Ellie had with making you care about your gameplay. Same with the Walking Dead game with Lee and Clementine. So RimWorld is a dangerous place. Kids are at risk of injury, sickness, kidnapping, and the stakes are very high. So since RimWorld is a story generator about people surviving on a dangerous planet, of course there should be children. Children are in stories. So with the marketing, I really focused on all of our materials telling stories. We made everything jam-packed with detail, especially our teaser blog posts. There was lots to read about and write about. As a result, it was very easy for journalists to cover our beats. So basically every teaser we did, we got an article on a major game news site. Good marketing generates more marketing. So among our screenshots, they all have a ton of detail. And I really focused on making these look like believable player-made colonies. Because I'd actually gotten in trouble about this in the past, where I was caught cheating items in for ideology. And it's worth it for a couple reasons. The first is that content creators make these hour-long videos analyzing every single thing in the screenshot and every sentence in our blog posts. And also, players then engage with these videos and read them and discuss them, and it builds up hype. Also, having excellent screenshots is the core of your Steam store page. Your landing page should look as awesome as possible when people first see your game. So here on the right, I have a cannibal pig family. And then on the bottom right, I have this really cute baby nursery, and mom's giving birth. And then I wanted to mention that sometimes the best marketing beats you can have are organic and by the community. So in a random screenshot, I hid a little pig child named Pork Chop and her pet dog. And the whole idea is that she's the sole survivor of this town as killer mechanoid robots walk by. And the community really latched onto this. They loved Pork Chop. And lots of fan art and stories about how Pork Chop became a mechanitor and built her own robot army with her cyborg dog. So I just want to encourage that how important organic marketing from your community is. And you should try to give them these storytelling opportunities, especially when you have creative products like this. Another strategy that we added for biotech is that we ran discounts for the expansions for the very first time. And we always run sales whenever we release an expansion because it brings more people into the store. increases visibility, and we sell our other products. So it seems obvious, but before biotech's release, RimWorld's expansions had never gone on sale before. And here's some context. And this is because of Ludion's historically conservative discount policy. In the 11 years it's been out, RimWorld has only ever gone 20% off on Steam. So why do we have this policy? And initially it came from developing a game in early access, but nowadays we're more inspired by Factorio. So it's been out for about 8 years now, and in that time, Factorio has never gone on sale. They have only ever increased their prices. And the Factorio devs have said publicly that it's about respecting your players that bought the game at full price. And it's also about believing your price is reasonable for your game and worth it. And for us, we think that RimWorld is worth it at full price. There is value for the content. So some stats. RimWorld has an average of 233 hours, 2,300 hours of playtime. And over 38% of our players have over 100 hours of in-game time. So that is value for your money. So how has our discount policy performed? This little to no sale policy has worked, and the game has sold at full price. But we've definitely left money on the table by discounting so little, and we would have done better by running these 10 to 20% sales off earlier in RimWorld's life. Also, we're changing it. Players are constantly saying that we don't run sales. This isn't true. We're regularly on sale. It just might not be on Steam. So we also run small sales, but that percentage is increasing as we become more and more of a DLC game. So with biotech's announcement, with biotech leading up to its announcement, we announced the price ahead of time. So the reason is that biotech was more expensive than ideology or royalty. And we wanted to communicate this ahead of time to reduce any shock or surprise from our community. And we weren't sure how much of a PR beat to make this. It wasn't enough to make it it wasn't enough content for an entire announcement. So what we ended up doing is putting it in one of biotech's teaser blogs. And there we discussed that the new price is worth it because of the length of dev time, the growing team. It's our biggest expansion yet. But the issue with doing this is that while we did generate positive conversation among our community, very few people actually read it because it was so far down in the announcement. And then at release, we had that whole conversation all over again, where people were shocked at the price. So because they hadn't read that teaser announcement. So overall, this was probably unnecessary, and we should have skipped it. OK, so the results of biotech's marketing campaign, pretty good. So we announced with over 3 times the wish list of Ideology's announcement. And then by day 9, we had surpassed Ideology's launch wish lists. And then we released with 182,000 wish lists. So of those, on day 1, 38% of them converted. And again, Ideology's was 42%. So we're consistent. We're doing well. We're getting more wish lists, and we're keeping our conversion rate about the same. So a couple things happened. So a few days before biotech's release, Steam updated their non-USD price conversion recommendations. So that's a mouthful, but it's basically that Steam helps you price your game in foreign currencies. So if you charge 35 USD for your game, Steam will suggest what to price it in Canadian dollars, euros, pounds, and so on. So regional pricing is really important because some countries can't realistically buy RimWorld at $35. So I got this example from a friend. In India, $35 USD is about 3,000 rupees, which you could compare that to someone's monthly salary there. So obviously, we need regional pricing. And we've used Steam's recommended prices in the past for RimWorld, royalty, ideology. So we were happy to apply our new recommendations to biotech because we trust them, and we've done it before. But we're kind of like guinea pigs, because this is the first time that players are seeing the new recommended prices in action. And it turns out at this time that Turkey and Argentina were facing some serious hyperinflation. So Steam's recommended prices were incredibly high. So much that biotech is actually more expensive than the base game. In fact, it's 4 times more expensive in Turkey and 4.5 more times expensive in Argentina. And just one more time, the DLC is more expensive than the base game. So obviously, players are upset, and unfortunately, they're leaving negative reviews behind on our base game. And there's a lot of comments on the Steam forums in our subreddit. So the morning of Biotech's release, we're literally on the phone with our Steam rep, asking to change our prices. And normally, Steam won't let you change so soon after release, but they understood that this was an unusual case and that they set the recommendations. So they made an exception for us. And we are very lucky that we had this ability and this contact to do this. So in the end, we adjusted Turkey and Argentina's price, as well as several other currencies. And the response was very positive. Lots of grateful players, nice threads and comments. And it was sort of a PR moment for RimWorld. Very unintentional. It was just us responding to players' concerns. But the pricing fiasco continues because a couple of months after Biotech released, we decided to change all of RimWorld's products' non-USD prices. And the reason why is that the situation with Biotech suggested to us that RimWorld's prices were low. They were from 2018, after all. And we'd also noticed a disproportionate number of sales from Turkey and Argentina. Very suspicious. We do not have a massive player base in these countries. And it found out that over 20% of our worldwide unit sales were coming from Turkey and Argentina. So what's happening here? And it turns out that RimWorld was selling at an extreme discount in many currencies, but especially here. So $2.50 and $3. And we found out that people were using VPNs and taking advantage of these countries' regional pricing to get the game super duper cheap and then resell those keys somewhere else. And it found out that we're not the only one experiencing this, because in August, Dead Cells had announced that they were changing their prices too in these countries for the exact same reasons. They found that they were getting a lot of Turkey and Argentina sales, but their player bases weren't increasing. And also, more SteamDB research showed us that lots of games had already increased their prices in these countries. So we're late. And we had major concerns about this. We wanted to change our prices, but after being review bombed with Biotech's Turkey and Argentina situation, we were nervous. And it wasn't just players from these countries. It was also, we were getting negative reviews from the people who had been using VPNs to get the cheap copies, and they no longer could. So we released a Steam announcement about our non-USD price increases to let our community know why. And we explained that we cited Valve's new price recommendations. We explained the VPN arbitrage that was happening and how people were taking advantage of regional pricing, how it sucks for the legitimate people that live in those countries, how the world's changed a lot since 2018. And also, we encouraged people to get the game while it was at its lower price before we increased the prices. And I just want to mention that with any PR beat, please be prepared for negativity, because people really hated this. There was a lot of community support too, but overall, the discussion was very toxic. And you know what? A few months later, we felt that we had gone overboard. We found that Steam's pricing recommendations were still too high, so we decreased our prices, and we announced it. Turns out, people also hated that. So it feels like you just can't win. So the lesson here is that you should not discuss your price changes with your community. Do what several other games have done, where they just adjusted their prices and they said nothing at all, because you can do that. It doesn't matter if you're decreasing your prices, if you have good reasons for it, or if your community even shows empathy. The overall discussion will always be extremely toxic and negative. And we made this mistake multiple times, with Biotech's price change, with RimWorld's price increase, and with RimWorld's price decrease. You know what? And our players even acknowledged that us doing these announcements was just asking to be flamed and hated on. So moving on to Anomaly. This is our most recent expansion. It came out this year in April, and a bit of trivia. She's based on me. Aww. Yeah. What about her? So Anomaly is a RimWorld horror expansion. It adds spooky events. Things like flesh creatures will burrow in from underneath your colony, and invisible monsters will hypnotize your colonists. It's also SCP-like. You can build these containment facilities and then study the entities that you capture. Anomaly was feature complete 2 months before it released, and the remaining time was all for marketing and testing. So this was awesome because we then gave ourselves more time to announce. We had a month between announcement and release. We also got streamers in to test. So we've always had testers, but by bringing in streamers, we got this really unique experience where these are people who are great at narrating their thoughts live, and it's very different from written feedback. We also did paid promotions. This was our first time paying for a front page slot on one of our store platforms, and it certainly was worth it for us. We paid back what we paid and more. And then we also launched with localization. Previously, we'd only ever released the expansion in English, and our community would have translated it themselves. So we wanted to give our non-English players the opportunity to play on day 1 too. And we also repeated that marketing beat with the marketing storytelling with screenshots and blog posts. And one of the events that can happen in Anomaly is that you're sent this beautiful cube as a gift. And slowly your colonists will become obsessed with it. And they want to be near the cube. They want to hold it. They'll make sculptures of it. And they love the cube. And people really took a hold of this and went wild with the memes and fan art. And then here's one with me that they drew. So again, just another example of how that organic community marketing is fantastic. So the results of our marketing campaign, it was with every expansion, our wish lists grow compared to the last one. And we gave ourselves a month between announcement and release. So Anomaly's announcement had nearly 2 times the amount of wish lists compared to biotech. So there was about 76,000 wish lists on day 1. We surpassed biotech's launch wish lists by day 3, and then we launched with 304,000 wish lists. But interestingly, only 25% of our wish lists converted on release day, which was nearly the exact same number of unit activations as biotech's release day. And there's a few reasons that this could be, but we don't exactly know why. I think it's worth analyzing the lessons afterwards about Anomaly. But we also think it was largely connected to the day of the week that biotech released, and Anomaly released. So biotech came out on a Friday, which is traditionally one of our best-selling days. And then Anomaly released on a Thursday, traditionally one of the lower selling days. So this big difference in sales wasn't that important. We actually caught up with unit sales a week later. But overall, some marketing lessons from Anomaly. It is not our highest reviewed or best-selling expansion. We tried something different, and it's not always a giant success. So what did we learn? We found with Anomaly that there is a problem when the expansion differs too much from the base game. For a player to like Anomaly, they needed to both enjoy RimWorld and horror. So people also expect more of the same. So Ideology and Biotech, the previous expansions, were just more RimWorld. But Anomaly is very different in 2 ways. The first is that it's horror. The other is that it's more of a linear story where you complete it once or twice, and you've seen all the scares, and you've completed all of the content and come to the end. Whereas Ideology and Biotech, these are endless and replayable, much like RimWorld. So again, for a player to really enjoy Anomaly, they needed to fit into this sort of Venn diagram of both liking RimWorld and horror. And this is really just a subset of our audience. It's legitimate to make a new, different product, but by digging into horror, we were cutting our audience down into this little subsection that would have been interested in this product. And with horror, we found that we struggled with balancing spoiling too much of it and too little. So horror is built around mystery and not knowing what's coming. With marketing, you want to show people all the cool things that are coming. And this is interesting because in the earlier talk today, there was the discussion of how much should we show before we release versus how little. And we struggle with this because with Anomaly, we revealed everything in our teaser blog posts. We would add like a spoiler announcement, but we found that it would just, that people would read all of it and then spoil themselves, so by the time they streamed it live, they knew everything that would happen. And then our final lesson, localization made people happy. People loved being able to play in their local language on day one, and it reduced these constant negative reviews on day one. We would always get reviews from people saying it's not available in my language on day one. So that 10% of negative reviews was basically eliminated with this. OK, so to wrap up here, RimWorld is a massive game. It's full of this rich storytelling and depth. We have an incredible audience of deeply passionate players and modders and creators. We've had some successes and some silly fails, and we're learning across the 11 years of game updates, expansions, and marketing beats. So I hope you enjoyed our story. Thank you so much for listening. And also, we're hiring. Sorry, I'm running a little long.
Wow, they're hiring. That's right.
Yeah.
OK, now questions.
Awesome presentation. Thank you so much. If you were to give a recommendation for a tiny studio, say like 1 to 2 people, for marketing, what would be the #1 thing that you would do?
Ooh, that's interesting. I mean, how far along into production are you? Because for some context, I think starting your marketing too early or doing the wrong tasks in the wrong order is really harmful. I think like the talk earlier today, it was mentioned that like you have to get started on the trailer, but you don't have the assets in the game yet to make the trailer. So I just kind of want to know where you're at.
Mostly feature complete, but still like, gray boxes here and there.
OK. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I would say start developing your socials and getting like organic content, like posting some content beats on things like you're making, things that are interesting. I don't know what your game is, but kind of the thing nowadays is short form vertical video content. So if you want to hype up your game on TikTok, it depends on like what are your goals. Are you trying to get wish lists? Is your store page up? Just get followers?
Yeah, I don't have a store page yet, but yeah, just basically starting to build interest and then eventually get a store page.
Right.
That's also another question. Store page and then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your store page is probably one of, if not the most important marketing piece that you have. So I definitely want you to focus on that and get that ready. Because while you're generating interest on socials, they have nothing to do. There's no call to action. Like they follow your account and then they forget about you. So I would dedicate some time between getting your socials ready, but also put together your Steam store page, make those assets awesome, get that trailer done. That's incredibly important as well.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
We have time for one more. Yeah.
Sorry, I gabbed too long.
Thank you for the talk. I'm a huge fan of RimWorld.
That's awesome.
Since Alpha 14.
Wow.
10 years. And one of the things I love about RimWorld is that it has that huge modding community.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps it fresh. And I wanted to know how that modding community factors into creating expansions and deciding on expansion content, especially where popular mods overlap with expansion features.
I see. Are you a modder yourself?
No, I've tried.
Oh, OK. Well, I would say that with any expansion we're making, the content, like, frankly, a lot of the stuff we're working on, we're just thinking about what would be the coolest stuff to add to the game. And what's interesting is that some of the earlier stuff that RimWorld, basically all the expansions that RimWorld has done, it's the same stuff that Tynan, the creator of RimWorld, wrote down in a document like years ago. And people always point back to, whoa, he came up with that idea like 10 years ago, and he's doing it now. So really, like I talk about it, our game design is marketing. And we're not thinking about what is going on outside of our world. We're just focusing on what is the best way to improve RimWorld? What spaces can we move into? So like with biotech, obviously children needed to be part of it. With Anomaly, we tried something different. We thought that this was a really great opportunity for horror. So again, we're thinking about what is the coolest stuff we can add to our game. And again, external things, we're not really part of that world. But that's so cool that you're a long-term fan. I would love to talk after.
Sure, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Tia.
Yeah, thank you.